Hello there guys, it's Joey, and this video is going to be about Aphrodite and the goddess Macha, sometimes pronounced Mocha, I've always followed I think it was the Woodfield with the Macha, so there we go. There are going to be items in this video that are a request. This entire video is a requested video, so for the person in the back who has marched onto this video ready to tell me how dare you mix the Celtic goddess Macha with the Greek goddess Aphrodite, I don't buy. This is a requested set for somebody who works with both, and I'm going to talk a little bit how I feel about Pantheon mixing and kind of like the troubles that gave me with the set originally. And that kind of creative process with regards to each of the goddesses and how there was a commonality, a common thread to the great big hawk that just landed outside the window on that satellite. That's incredible. Sorry, that's very unusual. And the thread of commonality was sort of a vein that was requested of these energies and items anyway, so we're going to be addressing a commonality, but for the most part I don't mix Celtic pantheons with other pantheons. It's not something which personally speaks to me. There are other people that do this, and as I work and create items for gods and goddesses outside of my own pantheon, I'm fully aware of the ability of them to come forward and be present and give images and give messages, and particularly with the Nordic pantheon, which I think slots a little bit better with the Celtic pantheon for their commonalities in sort of social and cultural, I want to say ecosystems. I think they're quite similar. So that's a side note anyway, but we will get into this in a moment. Firstly, I have no makeup on and I apologise for that. I know I'm frightening you all. Two, the reason I don't have any makeup on and the reason that I may stumble over my words is I have a migraine coming again because the weather has done this weird 180 thing again and it's just triggered my head again. So I wanted to get this video done while I make some kind of sense, because if I leave it I might not, and the items are ready for the customer who requested them. So before we get into that, we shall talk a little bit. I've got notes and things all over the place about how I feel about combining these two goddesses and why initially it gave me a bit of a headache trying to find a way of doing this. So it's actually made a heck of a lot easier in that I was asked for certain items that were completely separate and were for the goddesses themselves, so that worked really well. The pillars are separate, the smudges are separate. The salts were actually for Venus Aphrodite there, but Venus bath salts, and then there was a spell oil which I decided in the end to just make that for Aphrodite because we already have a warrior of trees energy on the store, which is actually for Macha or Mocha, depending on your pronunciation. I've seen both in use. So I have seen people get very irate with the idea about mixing and matching gods and goddesses from different pantheons. There are some people that feel that this pick and mix idea, this eclectic coming together of spirituality and matrons and things, is something which is abhorrent and should not be. Now, for me personally, with working with the Morrigan, I find that of whom Macha is considered to be an aspect or a vision of or a element of or herself in one form, well, a sister of, however you wish to interpret the law, it's very difficult for me to imagine working with other gods and goddesses because she is so vast and all-enveloping for me. She even covers quite a lot of, masculine, feminine duality within herself, so I don't even desperately feel the need to have a masculine counterbalance, if you like. And for me, it's just centric, and occasionally other gods and goddesses will come in. Now, in my personal practice, I had Brigitte come in twice, and that was kind of like with the Morrigan's permission thing. I felt a very strong presence of Odin once, and I think I have a feeling like they get along. There are quite a few people who say that they work with both of them, and I also had quite a strong persistence from Hades, but I'm not entirely sure that she was very pleased with that. So that might be why it went nowhere after a little while. So for me, it's not something which naturally resounds within what I do and what I practice. But when someone comes to you and they say, you know, I want this for my spiritual practice, this is going to be a part of something which is deeply personal and deeply spiritual, you accommodate. This is what I do. This is I want a level of professionalism about what I do and what I love to do, and this takes place in somebody's heart, in somebody's soul, in somebody's practice, and because of that, you have to find a make it work, basically. And so there is a commonality underlying the two, and the idea of a balance of self and a sort of a self-love, but it's from two different ways of seeing it, and as such we will talk about the goddesses specifically. So we're going to start with Macha or Mocha, depending on your pronunciation. So here I felt that the call of sovereignty was the key to understanding this energy, and I have a quote from Stephanie Woodfield's blog here. We're paraphrasing. Claiming your own skin, ruling your life, justly recognizing your own self-worth, and rising up to take control of your life like the king or queen you truly are. And that's from her blog. And then I wrote down what came to me in the process of working with energies for Macha or Mocha. The risk, the leap, to break the cycles of conformity and sensibility, to try to take the risk, to drive the spear. Oh, to try is its own thing. To try to take the risk, to drive the spear deep into our complacency and reclaim ourselves, to scream and rant and rail against self-imposed change of limitation. And so for me, I had this real issue with figuring out how these two goddesses could have any commonality, because I confess I am not a huge fan of Aphrodite from the lore and the mythos standpoint, and we'll talk about that in more depth when we get into the Aphrodite energies and where I went with it. Because Macha or Mocha has this honorability, this steadfastness, and one of her myths involves kind of being married and kind of the fallout of not being loyal to the one you love above all else, and letting your pride and ego get in the way of your love for marriage, and more than that, the bond of the promise, the spoken promise, the guise of having promised a goddess not to reveal her identity in that case, and it's kind of the going against the guise, the promise, and giving into your own selfish whim there, rather than upholding the honour of being the goddess's husband, has huge dire consequences. Whereas Aphrodite is married, and I can never pronounce Hephaestus. I can never pronounce it, especially not with migraine brain coming. And she considers him ugly and cheats on him and has children outside of marriage and all the rest of it. So that's kind of jarring when you have the goddess Macha and Mocha, who is very hardline on the idea of honor, and what comes with breaking a vow is a very, very dire consequence. It's not something you should be doing, and if you do it, then you're going to suffer. and all of the men who forced her to race against the horses suffer as a consequence for having no empathy for a pregnant woman. So for her items, this idea of sovereignty and claiming your own skin, which comes from Stephanie Woodfield's blog, I really liked that element of it. And because I have worked with kind of like the battle warrior element of her through Warrior of Trees, I really kind of wanted that kind of self-worth energy here, and the risk, the leap to break the cycles of conformity, to drive the spear deep into our complacency and reclaim ourselves, to scream and rail and rant against self-imposed chains of limitation. It's the breaking the chains wherever they might be. And I'll show you the pillar and then we'll talk about the smudge, because the smudge obviously has the evoking of a temple within it, which is what all the smudges do. So this is for the goddess Macha. Hopefully the light's okay today. People will be laughing at me. We have a very deep dark red, and then this is the top. So the top of the pillar, I wanted it to look a little bit earthy for her tie to her land and the sovereignty of land. I've talked about that on many occasions, about how the Celts believed that the well-being, the bounty of one's land was tied directly to the well-being, the health, the physicality of the king or the queen, and the sovereignty was determined by the gods. And I also wanted it to look a little bit more like armour. So it kind of has the reflection as if you were looking at battle armour. Worn, bloodstained battle armour at that. And then we have the smudge. The regality to it, honestly. So again, it kind of has that battlefield look to it. It's very warrior-esque. It's very earthy actually as well. And if I hold it there and look at what I want to. So there is the self-love element which binds the two, but Macha is very much about one's dignity, one's honour, one's independence, but also responsibility and duty to be the best version of yourself, to regulate yourself, to be the honourable warrior, to not go against one's word, to be better, to be stronger, to take the risk even if you don't want to. I was reading in Stephanie Woodfield's blog, which really resonated with me, with the idea of, you know, we don't often like change. And I don't know if this is a human thing, a me thing, a Virgo thing, an earth sign thing, I have no idea. But, you know, resistance to change because change is scary. It might be a survivor thing, to be honest. And even it's kind of like the certainty and unhappiness is easier sometimes than taking the risk. And Macha really rails and rants and drags us out of that. Morrigan in general tries to drag us out of that and make us force us to be better, even when it hurts, and really claim one's sovereignty and see sovereignty for what one is. So in creating the temple of the goddess Macha or Mocha, it's a scent combination which builds an energy matrix, which all the smudges do. It's a very in-depth process, which involves a lot of my nose, to be honest with you, and then kind of visualizing. It's very much about the battle space, the warrior space. It feels very much like the aftermath of a battlefield, or perhaps the foreshadowing of a battlefield. It's the beginning and the end of the battlefield. It's not actually the battle itself, but it's more about how we conduct ourselves before battle and following battle, depending on the outcome. It's more about one's personal reaction, one's personal sovereignty, and therefore who you are is determined in your decisions and how you conduct yourself building up to the battle, and then how you conduct yourself depending on whether it was triumph or failure, so following the battle. So it really is about the personal journey rather than the clash. Right, and so then we have items for the goddess Aphrodite, or Venus. If you're confused, then Venus is the Roman adoption of the Greek Pantheon, and she became Venus. And I think they kept a lot of their mythos very much the same and just changed the names as far as I'm aware. So I have written down here beauty, love and viciousness. She is known as Aphrodite, meaning waterborn, a seductress but an adulteress, married to, I can't pronounce his name, so I've tried once with migraine brain, that's enough. But she said that she hated him because of his ugliness, even though he was one of the most talented of the Greek gods. She had many children by other gods and affairs, most notably Ares. She's often portrayed, however, as being naked and therefore unbound by social rules, and is considered to be a goddess of self-love and healing broken hearts and wounded sexuality. So one of the reasons that I have trouble with this goddess is the story of Cupid and Psyche, and the vengefulness that Aphrodite displays. So there's a beautiful maiden called Psyche, and the people around her, not her, her people around her, proclaim how beautiful Psyche is, and so she must be Aphrodite because she's so beautiful, or that she is more beautiful than Aphrodite. And in a jealous rage, Aphrodite sends her son Cupid with a poison to kill Psyche for something that Psyche had not done herself. It's not that, from my understanding of this myth, it's not that Psyche was claiming to be more beautiful, it was that others were. However, upon his mission, he accidentally dropped an arrow upon his foot, Cupid, and because he was in awe of this beautiful maiden when he pulled back the curtain, and in his surprise dropped one of his love arrows upon his foot and fell deeply and completely in love. He vowed never to hurt her and did not kill her, obviously, to which Aphrodite was enraged and decided to plague the poor girl and torment her in so many ways that she would no longer wish to live. She set out to make her life miserable, and she forced her to do all these trials that nobody can possibly overcome by themselves, and it's because of her nature, her goodliness. She receives assistance from creatures about her. I'm fairly certain its ants help her to sort out nuts from one another, nuts and seeds from one another. And I think, the whole time Psyche refuses to give up on Cupid as well. They're trying to get her to give up on Cupid, and she won't. And then I think Aphrodite and her minions try to get her to kill her husband, try to trick her into killing her would-be husband, Psyche, which she doesn't do. Aphrodite sends her to get fleece from wild rams that were fierce as lions and were known for killing people. Anyway, there are many, many, many trials. And in the end, Zeus makes Psyche immortal, so the two can be together, and kind of outranks Aphrodite in how she was tormenting this other woman. yeah, so that kind of mythos put me at a point where I was like, and it's always sort of kind of put me off, but the way that I feel about love goddesses tends to be this, that love can be beauty and a deep connection and joyous, and it can also be ugly and vicious and tear us to pieces. And I guess as a goddess or god of love, then they kind of have to reflect that within themselves. You have to be careful a little bit with patriarchal stories as well, because how much of it is kind of like a masculine slant on things, trying to make female deities seem more petty and try to sort of dampen their power and things like that. So the thing is that she's quite demanding. Even in kind of like, I was creating these smudges and I was going to do Macha or Mochas first, and I put the first bit of essential oil in and I realised it was the wrong one. It was from the ones that I wanted for Aphrodite, and then I like heard this giggling like, you're gonna do mine first, tough. So I was like, okay, what? I wish I would do it by that. And what I've chosen to focus on a little bit is really the self-love element. That I was reading that some people do have great success with regards to the goddess Aphrodite or Venus, with regards to healing themselves and feeling better about themselves and healing their wounded hearts and so on and so forth. So firstly we have the pillar. So the pillar is a sea blue because of the sea foam element. I thought that making it pink was a little bit too obvious. I've made a little votive before that was pink, and I thought that worked on a smaller scale, but with this being a pillar, I really like the idea of it being sea blue, sea foam born, and then having the elements of like the pink and the love and the lust and the beauty on top here. And then we have the Venus bath salts, which are just full on Venus. The Venus bath is how she's often portrayed in art, naked in the bath or naked in water, and with regards to just beauty and like this nakedness. So this is just pure, unadulterated Venus bathing salts, and I hope you can see the shimmy because there's plenty in there. And there are shells in there as well for, you know, her sea connection. It smells good too. Oh, it does smell good. And so it's purely for bathing more than anything. So then I was asked to do a spell oil, and as I said, I decided that it was best to do Aphrodite one, as we already have a Macha and Mocha, and I really just couldn't blend the goddesses. It didn't feel right to me, so I decided that we would make the spell oil for Aphrodite. We've actually got a bit of light in here, that's not too bad. And then the smudge. So we have one little rosebud. Here comes the migraine brain. Right, so it just popped on top because basic 101 is to smudges that rose petals do not smell good when burnt. So there you go. So we do have one for decorative purposes, but this is the Aphrodite smudge. Let's just pop the lid down so I don't drop that while I'm holding it. There we go. There we go. So this is very much about creating a temple for Aphrodite, which would be a place of beauty and love. The celebration of beauty, love, and naked things. Really looking at one's naked soul and really learning to appreciate oneself for who one is in pure nakedness. And it's not necessarily the nakedness of the body, but the nakedness of the soul and the spirit and the heart and the mind and the emotional states, all interweaved into one energy matrix for a temple. The temple of Aphrodite has to look and smell appealing on a visual level, because obviously beauty matters to Aphrodite. Things have to be pretty. Things have to reflect how she feels her presence is portrayed. Beauty matters to the goddess. Things have to look pleasing and stimulating and arousing because of her deep dislike of anything not pretty, such as her husband. She tries to teach lessons about the following one's heart despite the consequences, I think, and that's kind of at odds with Macha or Mocha, and this is why I've kept them separate, because she has a more blasé attitude about, say, marriage, and is quite adulterous in the mythos. And as a result, it's more about one following one's heart rather than being chained by convention. So there is a thread of learning to love oneself and the elements of oneself, and that self-love element flows through both. It's just completely opposing perspectives on what is acceptable, I suppose. And I think in terms of the journey that the individual who requested these for, that's going to be two opposing elements in life that are going to be forcing a consideration of the opposing elements of one's self, of one's beliefs, of one's feelings on circumstances and situations which may have to be judged on a case-by-case basis. When is it the time to really follow one's heart and push aside social convention and push aside and just do what one just deeply desires, and when is it inappropriate to be doing so? When is it against one's honor to be doing so? When is that demeaning oneself rather than elevating oneself? Because you can elevate yourself in taking the risk, in being deep into something, deep in love, deeply passionate, and have that self-belief. But then on the other hand, sometimes that's going to be derogatory both to other people and to yourself, and it's kind of like finding that balance. So I hope you like the items. I hope I've covered how I feel about kind of opposing pantheons. I wouldn't do it personally, but that's me. And I'm not going to be telling anyone else what they can and cannot do within their spirituality, because we just had a video about how I feel about that. So there you go. But that's it for this video, because I got nothing more. My brain's like, just go lie down in the dark. Many blessings.